Is Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York. He represents the 8th District, my neighbor, greatest borough of Brooklyn. Great to have you with me. Let's start with how you've been digging into this. Last weekend, you took a trip with some of your colleagues across the river to New Jersey, tried to get into an ICE detention facility there just to see what was going on. What did you encounter when you did that?
Well, when we first arrived, even though we had authorization, there were a total of 7 members of Congress and a delegation led by the lead Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler. We had prior authorization from the individuals as well as their attorneys to meet with 5 detainees, 3 of whom were initially put into custody at the U.S.-Mexico border and then separated from their children. We wanted to get clarification from them as to what exactly had happened along their journey. The privately run facility, this is the Elizabeth ICE Detention Center, scrambled upon our arrival. There was no one from ICE, from the U.S. government, who was actually present.
All contractors.
All contractors didn't really know what was going on, even though there were 7 members of Congress with authorization. We waited for an hour and a half. Finally, we were able to get in. We were not going to go anywhere until we had the opportunity to have a meaningful conversation with the detainees, which we accomplished.
All right, it's been about a week. How emblematic was that visit, how it played out with what you're experiencing as you just try to find out what's going to happen next here now that the president signed that executive order?
Well, it was Exhibit A of what's happening all across the country and what's been emblematic of the Trump administration from day one: chaos, crisis, and confusion. And the American people are the ones who are suffering as a result of it. In this particular instance, it's immigration. But we've seen it with their fake infrastructure plan. We've seen it with their failed health care effort. We've seen it with the inability to resolve this trade issue and create good-paying jobs, higher wages for the American people. Now it's playing out in the immigration context in ways that are un-American, unconscionable, and unacceptable, ripping children away from their parents, spreading them out across the country. And even though there was this so-called executive order, no real plan to bring those families back together. That's shameful.
No real plan, and do you believe it's possible? Josh Gerstein from Politico just a moment ago saying if there were an injunction saying these families had to be reunited, many people doubt that logistically it could happen just because they don't know where these people are, how to get them back together.
Which is incredible. I mean, what kind of individuals separate these children, some of whom are toddlers, some of whom have been through incredibly traumatic experiences on a rough journey from the Central American and Northern Triangle countries, often Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, fleeing rape, fleeing violence, fleeing the possibility of kidnap, only to arrive at the land of the free and the home of the brave and being treated like common criminals. One of the things that's been most disgraceful about this whole situation is that the individuals that we've met with and many of my colleagues throughout the country have met with are seeking legitimate political asylum. They are not attempting to enter the country illegally. They are presenting themselves at ports of entry, fleeing violence back at home, articulating credible fears of persecution, and according to U.S. law, are entitled to be treated as possible individuals who can receive asylum. Jeff Sessions, Steve Miller, Donald Trump, and the boys are treating them like common criminals. That's a disgrace.
Last question here is just about your level of frustration. You're a member of Congress. By virtue of that, you get good health care, you get a pension, you get a good parking place on Capitol Hill, but you're all supposed to be able to get answers. That's something that comes with the job. And I wonder if you feel like you're no different than me or the folks watching here on TV, that it's not affording you any opportunity to get the answers that you need, that you could convey to your constituents. You read the president's tweets about the immigration bill or about waiting till this red wave comes that he's calling for in. Why is there this disconnect? Why does it seem like there's so much inaction, so much inability in Congress to do anything about this?
Well, we're going to continue to press the case, and hopefully my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will join us.
How hopeful are you about that?
Well, it's an open question, particularly in the House. We've seen far too often a willingness to put party ahead of country and defer to Donald Trump, no matter how outrageous his behavior. We should remind our colleagues, and we're going to continue to do that, my friends on the Republican side of the aisle, they don't work for Donald Trump. They work for the American people. We're a separate and co-equal branch of government. The American people deserve answers. We're the body that has the capacity to deliver it. We have to do that in a unified fashion.
On that point, I'll ask you about this column by George Will, the conservative columnist in the Washington Post, and he hits on that point. which is that you have Republicans in Congress who are subservient to the president. They're not going up against him. They're bending when he says to do one thing or the other. George Will, in that piece, saying this is something that happens with every administration. If there were Democrats in Congress and a Democratic president, the same thing would be happening. Does it feel different to you as a member of Congress? Do you feel like they are more subservient to this president than maybe you and your colleagues were when President Obama was in office?
It's absolutely different. I mean, and you can point to examples where Republicans disagreed with George W. Bush and Democrats disagreed with Barack Obama. But in this particular situation, we have an outrageous president who delivered nothing but a raw deal to the American people. We as Democrats are going to offer a better deal. The only way for that to change at the end of the day, many of us have concluded, is for the American people to hand the keys to the government to House Democrats in November, and so we can have checks and balances and some semblance of oversight and accountability directed at an out-of-control executive branch.